Hi, I'm Scott Allen Miller, and today on Sam IT we're going to talk about which is faster, SAN or NAS. Trick question. Because SAN or NAS are actually different technologies, there's no direct way to compare them in speed. There is an industry-wide misconception that is often repeated that says that SAN is high-end and robust and fast, and NAS is low-end and slow and kind of unreliable. This is absolutely, in every possible way, incorrect. NAS refers to an appliance-sized file server, which we'll dig into more in another video. But with NAS, you're simply serving out network file systems. With SAN, we're talking about disk arrays that are attached to a storage area network and supply block protocols directly over the network. Both of these are network storage, but they are completely different things under the hood, used for different use cases in different ways and do different things. So there's no way to compare, in realistic terms, the speed of a NAS to a SAN. That's the high-level technical, it just doesn't make sense as a question explanation, but let's dig in a little bit. In both cases, we're dealing with storage built on hardware. That hardware is a server, and those servers are realistically the same things. You can't really say this hardware is a SAN or this hardware is a NAS. They only become a SAN or a NAS depending on the software you run on top of them. So one doesn't have an advantage of having better hardware than the other, one's not more reliable. They are the same at a hardware perspective. It is only when we get to their use cases and how we deploy them and how we treat them that they start to become more or less reliable. And of course, we can treat either one as something we need to make reliable or that we don't make reliable. So you can get either SAN or NAS completely unreliable or extremely reliable. Both run the gamut, and they always will, because they're just different technologies applied to the same or nearly the same hardware. And in many cases, NAS and SAN are unified roles on a single storage device. In the SMB market, nearly all vendors like Synology, ReadyNAS, QNAP, Thecus, Buffalo, and even the SAMSD are all things that will do NAS or SAN equally. So you can't really look at them and say, well, one's better hardware, one's better software. It doesn't work that way. It's just different aspects of the same thing. Let's ask the question in a completely different way. Which is faster, Exchange Server or IIS on Windows? Go ahead, think about it. They're completely different things. How do you compare the speed of two unrelated things? Yes, they're both applications that run on Windows. Yes, they both expose network services. Yes, they both have speeds, but they're completely different. You can't compare them in a one simply faster than the other kind of way, especially when they share all underlying components and all forward-facing components, their interfaces to the outside world. So SAN and NAS simply can't be compared in that way. Now, there are use cases where both can be used. For example, you have a VMware ESXi cluster and you want to have external shared storage, and your choices are NFS from a NAS or iSCSI or Fibre Channel from a SAN, and it could be from the same box. In that case, you can, in that one specific scenario, compare which is better for you. But if you were to take those same technologies and want to use them for something completely different, but from the same hardware, everything else being the same, just a different use case for them, you may find the opposite is faster or slower or more useful or less useful, right? It simply isn't something you can compare in a vacuum. Now, there is a certain tendency in the industry for SANs to lean towards larger devices. But even this is almost a misnomer. There are SANs everywhere, but when they get low end, we often start ignoring the fact that they're SANs and just calling them something else. In fact, a USB hard drive, the ones you throw in your backpack, technically is as much a SAN as anything else is. It's all in how you use it. You can connect that to a network and it's block storage over a network, and it's completely unreliable. On the low end, you can get 1 and 2 disk NAS and SANs that have no protection whatsoever. They use the cheapest disks, the cheapest components, and have zero protections. On the high end, you can get both with an extremely large range of high availability features and vendor monitoring and proactive disk replacement and failover components and all kinds of things. Both offer both. Both offer huge pipes to the outside world. Both offer fast disks, fast ways to talk. Both have lots of innovations and take them in completely different directions. They're simply different technologies, and that's the core of the entire problem. We can't think of them as being faster or slower, better or worse, more reliable or less reliable. That's just not what they are. Simply two different technologies. So when you're approaching these kind of questions and you want to know which is faster, stop and think, that's not a question I can even ask. You can have a scenario where you can compare the two. You'll need to compare the two in that scenario. But in most cases, except for the limited SMB range where you're getting both things from the same device, you're not really going to be comparing a NAS and a SAN. You're going to be comparing specific models of NAS and SAN. And because at the high end, the vendors vary, you have very different things to be comparing. For example, you may be comparing someone like EMC or HPE 3PAR for your SAN, and you might be comparing someone like NetApp for your NAS. Both play in the same kind of space. They're very comparable. They have a lot of crossover use cases, but they're completely different vendors with completely different products that are built in completely different ways. Their behaviors, as far as reliability, performance, robustness, even ease of use, are completely different, but primarily based around the implementation by that vendor, not the fact that one is a NAS and one is a SAN. So it's very important to remember that almost never are you comparing apples and oranges in any way. It's not apples and oranges to begin with because they're two different technologies, but it's almost never the case that you're dealing with the same hardware outside of the ones that I mentioned. So you tend to be, on the high end, dealing with extremely different hardware that's highly unique, often proprietary, and you simply have to compare how they work for your workload and ignore the fact that you are comparing different technologies under the hood. At that point, it becomes moot which is which because it's how you're using it that matters. Thanks for joining me. I hope this helps explain a little bit about why you can't really ask the question which is faster or slower and why there is no answer, right? They simply are different technologies that do different things. Remember to like and subscribe, and you can sponsor on Patreon. If you have questions, be sure to put them in the notes below. We'll be generally pretty quick about answering them. Thank you.